Hello. So this is another episode of the Dharma Gates podcast. My name is Aaron. I'm one of the co-founders and current executive director of Dharma Gates. We are a 501c3 that works to open pathways into formal meditation training and practice for young people. We do that through retreats and advising and offering resources to support people to encounter and discover what Buddhist practice will mean in their life. And so one of the things we've been offering and building out this past year is interviews and recordings, podcasts, as are popular these days, with different people who provide different perspectives on, I think, the world of formal meditation practice. And by that, it means meditation that's in the context of a traditional approach, a traditional lineage of practice, generally in the Buddhist tradition, is where we're focused. And so today I have Chuan, who's a Chan monastic associated with a Chinese Buddhist community in California, the city of 10,000 Buddhas, as well as Redwood, Vihara, which is a very exciting project to create a Chan training monastery in the mountains, or I believe it's the Redwood Forest. I don't know if there's mountains there. I was imagining mountains, but I don't actually know.
Yeah, there's mountains.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, all the better.
Cruise Mountains.
Oh, cool. Great. Yeah, so I heard about Chuan through a wonderful interview between him and Ajahn Kovilo through Clear Mountain Monasteries podcast, which is another project, emerging Theravada monastery that I've been following quite closely. And I thought it'd be wonderful to have a conversation, largely because, one, there's not so many younger monastics in the West, and so I wanted to learn more about Chuan's story. And also the Chan kind of monastic tradition is not as well known, I think, at least yet in the West. In the United States in particular, there's a lot more emphasis on the Japanese and to some extent Korean branches of Chan or Zen. And so, yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about what that what's going on, what's it like to be practicing in the Chan tradition, and also what perhaps are some of the differences, if there are many, from between sort of Chinese Chan and how Zen is broadly conceived of and practiced in Western Buddhist communities. So with that, I want to say welcome. Thanks for joining me. And yeah, if you'd like to start by sharing just your own, I did my own attempt at an introduction, but if you wanted to also share, a little bit of your background and how you ended up where you are now, what was that contact point with the world of Buddhist practice that led you to make the decision to ordain, and yeah, how's it going?
Yeah. So first, thanks for having me. I'm very happy to hear that you're creating gateways for young people to meet the Dharma, because that was, for myself, very important to even start meditation, start Buddhism, and become interested in monastic life. I remember when I first started, this was back in 2000, there wasn't actually that many young Buddhist groups. And I ended up hanging out with people mostly my parents' age, like in their 50s, to be able to learn the Dharma. Or I'd be with these little kids, like maybe 12 years old in Sunday school, and they would not want to be there. And I would be the only 17, 18-year-old there. I remember them saying, Mom, I don't want to be here anymore. And I said, when you're David's age, you can choose to leave. But so yeah, just very appreciate what you're doing. And I'm very happy to be here. Just a brief introduction. Since I know you're on the East Coast, I was actually born on the East Coast in New Jersey. And I moved to the Bay Area. Right now, I'm in Berkeley, but there's a kind of a smaller kind of suburb called Saratoga, And I grew up there pretty much all the way till the end of high school. And near the end of high school, I became interested in spirituality. I kind of became, you could say, discouraged or disillusioned with the kind of modern, kind of Bay Area, Silicon Valley narrative of success, which oftentimes meant, making a lot of money, and kind of being very successful materially. But what I found was a lot of people around me were successful, from a external perspective, but actually quite miserable in their hearts. And I thought to myself, wow, if I work really hard, do I want to end up like that? Is there another way? And that's when I began exploring other paths, and I discovered meditation. I discovered kind of Buddhism. I kind of also spent some time in Christianity because I had a lot of friends who were Christian, and I have a real deep respect for all the different spiritual traditions. And in the end, I did choose the Buddhist tradition. Somehow I just felt my roots were there. And also I had a kind of, I remember meeting Ajahn Amaro in the Theravada tradition, and just meeting him and just going, wow, he is so relaxed and happy. I think I'm going to be a Buddhist. And so that was kind of a major gateway for myself. So I went to college and studied physics, and then followed by religious studies. And then I went to the 7,000 Buddhas in my heart, wanting to become a monk, but I knew my parents were not very supportive of it, especially my mom. From her eyes, this was definitely like failure. She felt like, she kind of failed as a mom because her kid is not, doing the normal thing, like going to get a job, getting married. He seems to be really interested in meditation and going to the monastery. I remember when I actually left to go and just kind of be a lay resident at the 7,000 Buddhas. I wrote something like a 18-page letter to my mom, wrote down, and I left it for her because I knew that I couldn't really explain fully what was in my heart because our interaction would sometimes become too stressful, and she maybe get upset with me, and I just would listen. But I wanted to really express really what was in my heart and why I wanted to explore this. So I wrote this fairly long letter, not saying I want to be a monastic, but just sharing I really wanted to explore this kind of spiritual path and kind of look into it. And I know actually my mom herself has a kind of wish for deeper meaning in her life that she herself, you could say, a little bit put on the back burner in order to, make a living, raise a family, and kind of be a very responsible, member of society. And so maybe I just kind of fast forward. So I spent about, from 2005 to 2010 at the 7,000 Buddhas as a kind of a lay resident, helping out with supporting volunteers. Because I grew up as an ABC, American-born Chinese, I'm fairly familiar with Chinese culture. I have a kind of I would say maybe like first grade level Chinese, but I can get by. And kind of growing up in America, I say most of my way of thinking is American. And so when new people come and stay at the monastery, like Ajahn Kovilo, who at that time was Ian Hillard, I helped take care of him when he was spending time in the monastery before he went and became a monk at Abhayagiri Monastery. So I'll just give you a last little outline. So from 2010, I actually decided to begin the monastic training at the 7,000 Buddhas. Got permission from my parents and went into the main monastery that was called Tathagata Monastery and spent a year there as a trainee in the Theravada Anagarika, holding the 8 precepts. And then we took novice precepts and trained as a novice for about 2 years and took forward ordination in 2013. So I became a bhikshu in 2013. And during that time, I actually came down to stay. Right now, I'm in Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, and I've been kind of just supporting this place with a small community of monks for the last probably 11 years, 12 years. And as everyone just mentioned, we're actually in the beginning process of starting a monastery in the Redwoods called Redwood Vihara. And it's trying to reflect really, you mentioned about our lineage, which is Chuan. Our Zen oftentimes is understood in the West, but this is from the Chinese lineage. To say, how do you update it in a way that connects to current times? Sometimes Chan can feel a little bit or seem kind of mysterious and enigmatic. And our hope is to actually kind of demystify it, decode it, and make it really accessible, but not lose the roots of what's there. And so, yeah, I don't know if there's anything specifically there. I also help at Dharma Run Buddhist University, have served as an instructor and assistant professor, but mostly as a chaplain there, just helping out with the students, and honestly learned a lot from being in that community about Buddhism, but also how important getting a kind of solid theoretical foundation in the Dharma is to guide us in practice. So maybe that much to begin.
Yeah, there's a lot, a lot there, a number of different threads I was interested in responding to. One of them was actually back a little ways towards the beginning of your story, which was, I actually have met quite a few young people now who have encountered this dynamic of their enthusiasm for practice bringing up a significant amount of tension in their relationship to their family, especially when there's a lot of pressure or expectation of a kind of particular kind of success.
Yeah.
Being a Buddhist monk is basically, you're a loser. You're losing everything.
Yeah, exactly.
In a certain kind of way, yeah. So one thing I was curious about was, in the time since you've ordained, and as you've gone, about as deep down this rabbit hole as one can go, how has that relationship changed or developed? Has there been some kind of ceasefire or some kind of new equilibrium that things have landed on, or is it still tense? Or
honestly, I'll say my relationship with my parents has really deepened, and it's transformed the way that I could not have imagined when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. It's having grown up in the Bay Area, what I found was a lot of times families are under a tremendous amount of stress. A house in kind of Saratoga and even in Berkeley here costs like millions of dollars, like $4 or $5 million is like not uncommon. So oftentimes parents are under tremendous amount of financial pressure. And in this area, there's also such a strong work ethic that often parents are working all the time. And then kids are growing up more or less on their own. And then you have addition that, at least for myself, being kind of an ABC. So my parents came from Taiwan and grandparents from China. And so there's also kind of a generational cultural gap. And so just built into that, there's a lot of friction and tension. And I remember as a young person just really feeling a lot of pain in my heart, seeing that in my own family, but in the families around me. And since becoming a monk, and actually learning the Dharma and having that as a kind of, you could say, like medicine, not just for myself, but knowing how to show up in my family has been extremely transformative. Like, I'll give an example. I remember when I first started out wanting to become a monk, I was very idealistic, and basically felt like I figured out my life, my life path, becoming a monk, cultivating the way, meditating, And my parents, their values, very materialistic, consumeristic, and I don't want anything to do with that. and and there was actually quite a bit of kind of, I would say, kind of pride and arrogance in my approach, and a kind of a rejection of their values. And I think I told the story with Ajahn Kovilo when he asked me about it. But when I actually talked with the senior monk here, Reverend Heng Shi, about wanting to become a monk, he told me, actually, it was interesting. I said, what should I do with my life? And his response was, you should listen to your mom more. I said, what? how, 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 how does that make any sense? My mom doesn't want me to become a monk. It's really unhappy with me all the time about this. And, how can I kind of listen to her more? Does that mean like I have to give up my aspirations? But I really respected Rong Shi and his wisdom. And so I spent some time thinking about it. And I realized, what? I just need to be a good son. All this energy I'm putting into trying to be a monk, I just need to learn to be a good son. And it began with, and there's this little booklet that we have. It's actually talking about the Chinese Chuan tradition. I would say a lot of it's based on Confucianism, kind of Confucian principles. And there's a book called Standards for Students. And the first couple of lines in that kind of poem, it's like a long poem that describes how to be a kind of a kid in the family and how to be a student. And it went something like, when your parents call, immediately respond. And then when your parents correct you, listen patiently. And so I won't go into all the details, but I actually tried it. And amazingly enough, my entire relationship with my parents changed at home, because rather than me being so focused on myself and what I want to do, I actually started really paying attention to what their needs were and how can I show up in a responsible way in the family. And still, I think they were not so supportive of me wanting to become a monk. They thought it was kind of unrealistic. But at least they could see I wasn't kind of isolating myself or kind of pushing away the family in that process, but had a real respect for them and care for the family. And that's when I said I wrote that letter. What I wrote to my mom was, I'm not leaving, going to the monastery because I don't care about the family or I'm unhappy with things here. So I really care about the family, and I feel there's something so important to me that I hope can be of some benefit for the family. And over the years, I was really moved one time. My mom spoke with me on the phone. I'd been with the monastery for a while, and she said, you know what? I realized just kind of going to these potluck dinners with my friends and just comparing the kids is really kind of meaningless. Oftentimes, especially, I don't know if it's for all parents, but at least I know for Chinese parents, they go get it together and then they talk about their kids and where they're going to school and what jobs they're going to get and da 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 da. There's a little bit of this comparison, in the background, kind of this background competitiveness, and it kind of establishes your status in the community. And she said, well, it feels kind of meaningless and superficial. I really would rather devote my time to education. And so she was on the school board and she really put her heart into that. And the other thing I felt was really interesting was when I actually decided to become a monk, and I got my parents' permission, and then I got a lot of calls from my family members, from my aunts and from others. So wait, we hear you're gonna want to become a monk. Are you sure about this? And it was very interesting, is because I would kind of listen to their concerns and then say, would you really want to hear what's in my heart? And they say, okay. And I would share with them, what I was aspiring to. And more often than not, they said, okay, I respect that. I can see there's something of value there. And what I've never had that conversation with my relatives before. Usually you go home, it's like, what have you eaten yet? Have some food. It's a kind of fun. But having a deeper conversation about really what I cared about and hearing this, like, what do you find really meaningful in your life? That kind of deeper connection was never established. And all of a sudden, when I went on this path, those places, you can say, got some nutrients, our roots, because our families are our roots, right? And so it's like our roots are there connected. And another place where I saw for my family especially was I also accepted my parents for who they were rather than what I wished they to be, my kind of ideal of what they should be. So, they're people, and my role is just to care for them, with as a son, and then as a monk, and not have kind of idealistic expectations for them how they should be. It's kind of equanimity. If you look at the Buddhist teaching, loving kindness and equanimity, and I felt that radically changed my relationship with them, because all of a sudden they could feel that for me, I'm not coming with a real strong judgmentalism, and a lot more empathy and ability to listen, which allowed them also to be able to listen to themselves more. And although I didn't, in my heart, of course, I wanted to be more harmony in the family. In the past, I would kind of try to force it into the family, to my parents, they should be doing this or whatever. But I just kind of stopped. I just listened and just was a kind of a caring presence. And amazingly, over time, actually, my parents just went on some vacation together, and they seemed to be quite happy. Which honestly, I was like, wow, like 10 years ago, I don't know if that would have been possible. And then my mom was sharing with me, I was like, I'm just, in my heart, just there's a kind of a warmth knowing that your family is happy. And honestly, my mom, we just had a gathering at Redwood Vihara maybe 2 or 3 weekends ago, and I think the question was, how do you define success? We went around, we have like a circle of maybe like 20 people, and honestly, my mom's kind of said, what I really feel is one of the biggest successes in my life was that my son became a monk. And I was like, wow, it's um, it's nice to know that my mom really supports me in this journey now. Same with my father. In the beginning, my father was, I'm okay with the spirituality thing, but you really should go out and make a lot of money, and you can donate it all to the monastery. That'll be a lot more efficient use of your skills. That'll be much more effective. Monastery. I become a monk. I don't know. Right now is the best time for you to make a lot of money. I said, well, but right now he sees like, wow, there's actually, being a monk has a lot of, value for a community, and I think he sees that. And so, anyways, just over time, it's interesting just being on this journey. We're not just going on this journey alone. We're deeply embedded in a bigger web of relationships. And actually, one of the reflections I've had is to really sustain ourselves in the monastic life. It doesn't actually come from willpower. It's not like I'm going to do this and you grit your teeth and you get through it. It's actually realizing how much we've been given, how much care we've received from our parents, from our family, from our teachers, from our friends, and this sense of, wow, I really want to, some they say pay it forward, although I don't like that transactional idea. It's just that place of kindness then naturally manifests in the spiritual path, to kind of walk on this path to be of service to others. So anyways, I don't know, that's answers the question, but I say my parents and my
beautiful
family
answer.
I'm very happy, and it's honestly, I is more than I would ask for. When I was just praying to, we say the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, I was just hoping my parents would not be angry with me. We could just, I just don't want them to have like a heart attack, or and just be really upset with me wanting to become a monk. If they could just let me become a monk, I'd be just happy, please. But at this point, it's way more than I expected.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story, showing kind of this mysterious way that the practice works on not just you, but those around you too. And I want to talk a little bit about that element, but I was also curious just to hear a little bit more about the training and the practice experience that you had at City of 10,000 Buddhas, and what was it like? What's the day-to-day routine? I'm quite familiar with some Zen monasteries, Japanese Zen monasteries I've been at, but I don't really know what what do they do over there?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So our day starts at 4 a.m. And we begin with a mantra called the Shrangama mantra. It comes from a sutra called the Shrangama Sutra, and it's considered one of the main Chan texts. It's almost like a meditation handbook, you could say. And it's a teaching for Venerable Ananda, who essentially asked the Buddha, how do I cultivate samadhi? And so we begin with this mantra that I would say kind of sets the spiritual energy for the day. It's said that this mantra kind of sets a kind of protection. It protects the world, it protects ourselves. It kind of creates this kind of field of, maybe say, good vibes. And then we recite various mantras, and then the Heart Sutra, which I think is also very familiar for those in the Zen tradition, and a number of other practices for about an hour to about 5 a.m. In our main monastery, 10,000 Buddhas, we actually spend another hour bowing. It's a very slow bow, finishing with a repentance verse. So a lot of the emphasis and training is on, you could say, this kind of renewal, where almost like say learning how to be a person as a monastic. And oftentimes it's learning how to eat again, it's learning how to sleep, it's learning how to walk, that's learning how to talk, these kind of very fundamental ways of being, which aren't easy to change because they're so deeply ingrained. And so this bowing practice, what's amazing about it is it's actually quite somatic. Meditation is wonderful in the sense of like sitting and just being able to be still. But sometimes something arises in the heart that is, kind of disturbing, or like a shadow, or something we really felt like we hurt somebody or hurt ourselves. And what I found is bowing, just that gesture, kind of being in child's pose on the ground, there's a kind of a release. And then you stand up again as a kind of a renewal. And so that's kind of I would say the main emphasis in the training as a trainee and then as a novice, is that you're going through a process of renewal. We're learning how to be a person in this spiritual form that the Buddha designed, that's been carried on in this lineage for generations till this day. We then have a bit of an open space. Oftentimes people meditate, and then we recite a very important sutra in our tradition called the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Garland Sutra, sometimes translated, or Flower Ornament Sutra. And it describes the Bodhisattva path in great detail. We do some service in the monastery, oftentimes maybe kind of groundskeeping, or sometimes we have events that we're helping to organize. We have our noon meal. We start with a brief ceremony to offer the food, and then we have the noon meal. In our tradition, we just eat one time a day. Our kind of founding teacher, Master Hua, kind of wanted to maintain that standard for the monastics in our tradition, to say, kind of just eat one meal. What sometimes happens in kind of the Chan tradition is that the monastics end up not holding the rule around not eating in a proper time so strictly. And so I think he wanted to kind of lay that foundation here in the West. So that's like, we really want to uphold the Vinaya, which is why we have a very deep friendship with the Ajahn Chah Thai Forest lineage, because there's that mutual respect to the Vinaya. Then we have another repentance ceremony called the Great Compassion Repentance, devoted to Guanyin Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva of Great Compassion, to about 2 o'clock, 12:30 to 2. Then we do a little bit more service, have a bit of a break, and then we have our evening meditation, followed by an evening ceremony. We recite various sutras. For instance, if you heard of the Amitabha Sutra, that's part of the Pure Land School. And then we have an evening lecture at 7:30, and we conclude the day from 9 to 9:30 with another mantra recitation. And so it's a pretty full day. And what I experienced in the Chan school, and I see that's hearing from a little bit from someone also trained in the Korean kind of meditation tradition, as well as in the Korean tradition, it's similar that people are practicing all the time together. I think if you imagine in China, they often have thousands of monks living together, practicing together. So they would often be living in one place and just practicing alongside or working alongside each other all day long. So that's something that is another part of the training, is learning how to work and be with other people, learning how to be in harmony. Um, and I think that's particularly difficult growing up in America, where we are very much used to kind of individualism, and learning to actually um, be more sensitive to the community was actually another major point of learning for myself. It's just a kind of a different sensitivity. I think in the end, in the Dharma, we have to have both. There's a sense of solitude, and there's a sense of being with others. But that balance, I think, um, manifests in different ways in different traditions. Like, for instance, I just finished with this monastery we're hoping to start in the Redwoods. We're hoping to actually learn from the Theravada kind of Ajahn Chah forest tradition, and actually having some more time for solitude in the forest, rather than kind of always community practice, and seeing what's the right balance for that. Maybe one more thing, because I think this is also was quite critical for our training, was intensive meditation or recitation retreats. For instance, we would recite Guanyin Bodhisattva's name, or for those maybe from the Avalokiteshvara, and we just recite her name from morning to night. And if people haven't tried that before and really would like to kind of try out a meditation practice and have the time, we have those retreats pretty regularly at our monastery, the 7,000 Buddhas. And it's quite amazing how focused you can be through recitation, and being with everyone else really supports it, because you're just chanting just her name all day. And the mind just kind of naturally calms down. And it's used as a kind of a stepping stone for Chuan practice, because it's a lot easier to focus on recitation than on kind of just complete emptiness. As I say, it's a little bit like if you people haven't tried it and want to give it a try, it actually is extremely useful as a Dharma tool. Like having various tools in our toolkit, the recitation practice is extremely helpful. And that becomes the foundation, which we then do a Chuan session. And that could be for like 3 weeks. And it's a pretty intensive schedule, starting off then from 4 a.m., going to maybe like 10 a.m., 10 p.m. Sometimes it goes to like 12 a.m. So it's like a really full kind of meditation session, where essentially we're sitting for an hour, walking for 20 minutes, sitting for an hour, walking for 20 minutes. And there, what you're supposed to do is you recite, say, Guanyin Bodhisattva's name, Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa, or Namo Amitofo, which is Amitabha Buddha's name. And then as your mind focuses down on the recitation, you actually, in Chan, change the place of focus by asking who. So that it becomes, the question is, who is mindful of the Buddha? Or who is mindful of Guanyin Bodhisattva? Or you just ask who. And you're kind of inquiring or investigating deeper into your awareness, rather than just holding a kind of a meditation object of a kind of a name and just kind of keeping that focus. Is actually kind of going deeper into our awareness and kind of starting to penetrate. And in the Shurangama Sutra, it's actually, the method is actually given a lot of kind of explanation, because that was actually Guanyin Bodhisattva's own method for awakening. How she actually, through her hearing, which is what Guanyin Bodhisattva's name means, is kind of hearing the sounds of the world, listen inward to actually hear her true nature. And then through that, kind of open her heart of great wisdom and great compassion. And so, so that's the method, is kind of who, when you just kind of inquire, it's like that just becomes your focus. So yeah. So if you go to a Chan monasteries, that's pretty much the main practice for many people. They say who, or in Chinese say, and it's just, you just And it's the idea is that you have this real curiosity. Sometimes you use this word doubt. We just had a chance to be with Ajahn Jayasaro, and we were talking about Chuan, and he said, I have a doubt about the translation of doubt, because usually in Theravada, doubt is always an affliction. He says, would it be better translated as intense curiosity? And I thought, wow, yeah, I agree. Because I honestly had many years completely, I would say, the doubt was just doubt, confusion, Rather, it's a kind of a stable curiosity where you're open and open and opening and opening and opening and opening. It's not an agitation, it's not like a forcing, where sometimes Chan, at least when I started, I had that kind of mentality. It's like I'm just going to force myself to awakening, and that doesn't bode well for the meditator.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to hear about I've seen the influences of a lot of those practices in the Zen tradition, the kind of Japanese Zen, but it's also different, I actually have the Surangama Sutra. Interestingly,
Oh,
I bought it on a whim at one point because I wanted to learn more about the kind of history of Zen. And yeah, there can be this effect where when you practice something like Japanese Zen, which has gone through so many layers of transition since the kind of historical Buddha, that you don't even know how all the pieces really fit together anymore. Like, I know of the Avatamsaka Sutra, and I know, the teacher up at Zen Mountain Monastery references it, but I don't really know how it fits into the whole arc of the Mahayana, and that's something I've been piecing together some myself just through reading and learning. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about, so it sounds like you did have pretty early contact with the Theravada and Mahayana traditions, and why did you end up going with the one you went with? And is there a piece of that called you strongly in that direction, or was it just flipping a coin?
that actually was not an easy decision. A couple difficult decisions. One was actually choosing the religion. I was already, as I said, disillusioned by the whole kind of material success story. So that was, I already said, no, I'm not doing that. But then I was exposed to Christianity and Buddhism, and I was thinking, so, really what path I want to follow there. And Ajahn Amaro was a kind of a pivotal person for that. Once I met him, I thought, wow, he's somebody worthy of emulating, kind of somebody I really want to learn from and become like over time. And then the next question was, should I become a monk at a Bhayagiri monastery or the City of 10,000 Buddhas? Because I had such a strong affinity for a Bhayagiri monastery. And so maybe just go back a couple steps. When I was in college, I met a young adult group called Dharma Realm Buddhist Youth. And we had a number of retreats at the 10,000 Buddhas and in monasteries here in the Bay Area, like Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, where I'm here now. There's another monastery called Gold Sage Monastery in San Jose. And we even, I think, visited a Bhayagiri monastery and had even Ajahn Amaro lead a retreat for us at the 10,000 Buddhas in those years, early 2000s. And so I was really familiar with the 10,000 Buddhas, and that's where I primarily went for practice. But what I found difficult was honestly what you just mentioned before about this training, the kind of the Chan training, which I just described, which is this really kind of community-based practice that was kind of all the time together, and I would say maybe didn't have as much of a sensitivity for Western culture. And for myself, I felt a little bit like I don't know if I really would thrive here because I'm actually, they sometimes joke that the ABCs are bananas. You can say we're yellow on the outside and white on the inside. It's kind of a joke, but there's a certain level of truth to that, in the sense that I would be in the monastery and I'm kind of Asian descent, but inside, the way I came at things and understood things was quite different from the other monks who were much older than me, in their like 50s. And so I thought, wow, if I go to Baigiri Monastery, I had, really good spiritual friends like Ajahn Kovilo and others, who almost like when I speak with you, we're like immediately connected. We know each other's backgrounds. We share very similar spiritual aspirations and so forth. So there was actually a lot of inner turmoil, trying to reflect on, really what path do I want to go on when I want to become a monk. And so there was parts of the 6,000 Buddhas, or you could say the Mahayana tradition, that after, you could see, really grew on me. And you just mentioned the Avatamsaka Sutra, and that's one of these texts that I would say has been extremely formative for myself. It's said to be the sutra that the Buddha spoke upon his awakening. He was meditating under the Bodhi tree, and then he actually woke up, and then he saw this kind of vision of how things are, and it's basically mind blowing. Just worlds upon worlds, is this infinite worlds, and they liken to like Indra's net. I don't know if you've heard of that analogy. Indra's net, where every interstice in this huge net that Lord Indra has like a pearl, and every pearl reflects every other pearl on this net. And then in every pearl, because it's reflecting every other pearl in the net, reflects itself as well, has an interreflection of itself. So if you imagine looking at one pearl, you see in that pearl every other pearl in the net, and you see infinite reflections of that pearl in itself going back. And that's the Avatamsaka Sutra, is that in every moment, we're interrelated in these infinite ways that we can't imagine. And then because of that, then how do we respond? Well, we respond with great compassion. We take our spiritual lives and we devote it to service. And that vision, you could say, to me, was like, wow. In the beginning, it was, I would say, kind of like a little bit overwhelming. Because, I was just kind of, well, I just want to get out of suffering. But as I said, it kind of grew on me over time. It's like, wow, my mind is just so expansive, in the sense that this is how, it's just the assumptions of how we go about practice. That's just every single ceremony. That's the underlying tone. Like this morning ceremony, our chants, our meditations, there's always this underlying tone that this is being done on behalf of all living beings, so that they all can, realize full awakening. And that just becomes this underlying tone. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure if I can completely give that up. Although Baigiri Monastery is quite exceptional because it has a lot of friendship with us, and so the monks there also study the Shrangama Sutra and have a lot of connections. But the focus is usually on the path to arhatship, the Four Noble Truths: suffering, the origin of suffering, cessation of suffering, and the Noble Eightfold Path that gets us, the way out of suffering. And I'll say the Mahayana takes the Four Noble Truths and then says, okay, yeah, there is suffering and we can get free, but how about everyone else around us? How about our families? How about our friends? Right? How about their suffering? And so all of a sudden, it's not just my own suffering I hope to get free. It's like, I hope that I can help everyone out of their suffering. It's not just that I have cravings and desires that cause pain and problems, is everyone has difficulties. Can I help them find the inner resources to get free? And can I, as you're doing in Dharma, is it Dharma Gateways or Dharma Gate? Yeah, Dharma Gate. Creating pathways for people to learn meditation. Right? You're actually saying, it's not, the spiritual path is not just about myself kind of going on this path, but I want to actually create gateways for people to discover this spiritual path that can lead to their well-being. And you might need to develop many gateways because many people are different and everyone has maybe a different approach to meditation. Some people really enjoy Zen. Some people like Chuan. Some people like Pure Land or recitation. Some people like Vipassana. Each person has different kind of affinities, and you create those gateways for everyone. And in order to do that, you have to learn everything. So that's why the Avatamsaka Sutra really emphasizes learning, because in order to be of real service, you need to learn everything. And you even see it in the Buddha's teaching, even within the Theravada, right? There's a really famous sutta. It's actually the logo of a Bhayagiri monastery where they have I don't know if you have the handful of leaves. The Buddha has a handful of leaves in his hand, and he holds it out to the monks, and he asks the monks, "O bhikshus, are there more leaves in my hand or the leaves in the forest?" And the monks say, "Oh, a world honored one, the leaves in your hands are few. The leaves in the forest are many. Of course, there's many more leaves in the forest." And he said, "This is what I teach you, but what I know is the forest, because this will help you get out of suffering." And so you could say within the Mahayana tradition or the Chan tradition, we're learning the leaves in the hand, but also the forest. That's the aspiration. And so kind of going back, it was still not an easy decision. And in the end, it kind of was a little bit of a push from one of my Dharma friends who said basically, how to say to this way, you've been given a lot through this community. The senior teachers here have shared a lot of inspiration, guidance, and so forth. And he said in a little bit of a pointed way, because he's sometimes good friends are like a little bit. But he's basically said, if you just kind of go off and don't really, kind of, you could say, continue this lineage, all that support that was given to you in a way doesn't get continued, because the other people won't have that opportunity as you had. Because I was very fortunate. I went to the monastery, and I had opportunity to have a lot of the senior teachers kind of give me advice and support me, because I was pretty much almost the only American in the monastery really interested in becoming a monk. And at that time in the Siddhanta Buddhists, mostly of it's kind of a Chinese community there. And there's actually a lot more interesting stuff there, but basically he said, so for you to actually go on this is actually quite important as a kind of a bridge, you could say. And interesting enough, that's actually became my monastic name, kind of spontaneously, but Reverend Shu actually gave me the name Jing Chuan, and Chuan means to kind of carry on, or you can maybe say like bridge. So it's like kind of carrying on. And so almost I feel like a little bit of my role in the monastic form is to kind of carry on this tradition and really interpret in a way that actually makes sense for those in our generation who have real deep respect for the roots of the tradition, but also realize that we have to make it our own for it to be really healing medicine for ourselves. And that's going to take time and take real understanding and experimenting and honesty, not just kind of following dogma. And so, yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah. And I resonate a lot with this. I've also been practicing in the Mahayana and the Theravada for a couple years now, and I'm a little bit of I don't think it's indecisive, but it can feel like that sometimes.
Maybe one more thing about that is my sense, some people sometimes ask, what tradition are you? And sometimes I say Mahayana. I always felt kind of not a great answer, because in my heart, I don't really feel there's a difference between Mahayana and Theravada in that way. I have such deep respect for the Theravada, and I use so many of the quote unquote Theravada practices. And and their spiritual teachers like Ajahn Jayasaro, Ajahn Amaro, Ajahn Pasano, Ajahn Sumedho have been like guiding lights for my own life. I wouldn't have gone through the monastic training at the 6,000 Buddhas without listening to Ajahn Amaro pretty much every day, through his
Yeah.
Dharma talks and his recordings, because he would give me the understanding of the Dharma that made sense to me in my context to kind of understand these practices that I was doing. And so our tradition is actually called Dharma Realm Buddhist Association. So I thought, well, maybe the tradition I'm coming from is Dharma Realm, meaning kind of all inclusive. So it's like this Theravada Mahayana, it's all Dharma, helping us heal and wake up. And at different times, we use different tools. And so to me, I don't quite see like, oh, it has to be Theravada or have to be Mahayana. It's like, actually, it's all kind of one piece. And each of us are on our spiritual journeys. And sometimes, the Theravada teachings, as it's explained within certain ways, make a lot of sense and help a lot. Sometimes, as explained in the Mahayana sutras, also is really appropriate. Sometimes through the Indian interpretation, sometimes through a Chinese interpretation, sometimes through the Japanese tradition. They all have the different strands, different flavors that you could say really provide sustenance.
Well, I'm aware we're coming up on an hour in the recording, and I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I would love to hear a little bit more about the vision for Redwood Vihara. I know, a part of why I wanted to reach out to you at first was I was interested, I'm interested in more, basically, there's very few training monasteries in the West, really, and none, as far as I know, other than perhaps City of 10,000 Buddhas. Maybe there's a few more I don't know about, but in the Chuan tradition specifically, I don't know of many. So I'd love to hear what's going on there, and what's the imagination of what that place could be too in a few years.
Yeah. So that was my experience too. There's not very many places to train to be a monk in the vision of, you could say, the Mahayana Sutras. And you could say Chan, although I would say our tradition is not just limited to Chan. It's actually very inclusive of many different spiritual practices. And I think that's one of the things that I found within the Chinese tradition, especially, at least the tradition I'm in, is essentially it's whatever works for you. If you like Pure Land, great. If you like at the esoteric school with the mantras and mudras and mandalas and the visualizations, great. That's fine. If you want to, hold the Vinaya very strictly and that's your school, go for it. If you like to study, no problem. That's also a great doorway. So Chan is one door among many, one gate, you could say, among many gateways. And even from our founder, Master Hua, his sense was, as it's coming to America, new gateways will develop that have not existed before, because it's a new culture and a new time. And in some ways, you say Redwood Vihara is trying to explore what are some of those new gateways. And a couple of the places that we found important, one is, we just mentioned before, this kind of bringing together of Mahayana and Theravada, where we sometimes like to say the northern and southern schools of Buddhism. And so if you look at the main hall we have there at this Redwood Vihara, we have 3 Ming Dynasty images, which are probably 500 or 600 years old, time of Shakespeare, right, in terms of time. There's a story there too. Someone just offered them to the monastery. And we also have a Burmese image from Burma that's maybe 200 or 300 years old. And we have them all on the altar. And to me, it just symbolizes, just very concretely, the bringing together of these two traditions. We have Master Hua on one side, we have Ajahn Chah on the other side. And Ajahn Chah was given to us by one of the senior monks in Abhayagiri, Ajahn Jodipalo, who does actually iconography. He made an icon, which is a kind of Christian Western art, iconography of an Ajahn Chah, and he gave it to me as a gift, after the fires of Bayagiri, and he said it's funny. He said to me, because he spent a week at City of Thousand Buddhas, and he said when he got to Bayagiri and accompanied him back, he said he wanted to give me the first thing he saw in his kuti, and then he saw this image of Ajahn Chah, and he said my next thought was, but I really like that image. That's one of my first images. And when he gave it to me, he said, because I had that thought, I had to give it to you. And so, so we have Master Hua, Ajahn Chah, and just that sense of these two traditions coming together. And that is also within the practice itself. So in my sense, a lot of really good foundational practices come from Theravada, Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, body awareness, right? Loving kindness. I think the Theravada have developed loving kindness really well. The four boundless, the four hearts, or sometimes called the, I guess just Brahma Viharas. Loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. And really watching those in the heart, understanding the Eightfold Path really well so that you can use it in your daily life. Skillful speech, wise and kind. It's just kind of very foundational practice, really honoring the Vinaya and trying our best to uphold it. Right. So that kind of sense of you could say purity and kind of foundation, to me then lays the groundwork for then the like say the Chuan school of investigating the Huatou, or the meditation topic. So then when you begin this Hu investigation, you're not coming from a place of kind of frantic seeking, hoping to get enlightened. Like, can I just try harder? I'm going to get enlightened. It's actually, the mind is already really balanced and stable and mature. And there's this ability to just kind of explore from this real open heart of curiosity. This kind of open heart curiosity, kind of just observe deeper and deeper, and the awareness gets more and more subtle. It's not that the awareness gets tighter and tighter. That's what I started with. I thought concentration was like, okay, got to get really tight and focused. It actually relaxes, opens, and the body, heart, and mind unify and become much more balanced. And so our hope is that the Theravada serve as a foundation for then the practices that we have in our tradition through recitation, through Chuan meditation, through service, like the paramitas, some of the 6 paramitas or the 10 paramitas, right? That kind of is an important element of it. And so our hope is to really develop a training that brings these traditions together. Another element is the importance of education. Like you just mentioned, the Shrangama Sutra and the Avatamsaka Sutra. And what we found interesting enough is at our university, Dharma Realm Buddhist University, quite a few of the students that come are actually from the Zen tradition. And they come because they said, we heard about these texts, we don't know too much about them. And I really want to study these because somehow I know they're important for this tradition, but there's such a strong emphasis sometimes that we just sit and don't spend too much time studying that we don't really know what these are. And so they come and we have a chance to really explore the platform sutra of Great Master Hui Neng, who was one of the most important kind of ancestors of the Chuan lineage. It's called something called the 6th ancestor. There's the Shrangama Sutra, there's the Avatamsaka Sutra. And so for us, this really kind of, you could say systematic learning of the Buddha's teachings, so that when we begin our practice, we have the, you could say, skillful framework to understand what's going on. There's a saying that practice without study is blind, and study without practice is bland, is like flavorless, is useless. But when they're done together, then there's real benefit. And so for us, we want to bring the study and practice together so that people really get a good foundation in the Buddha's teachings, but in a way that's very engaging. Meaning, at Dharma Buddhist University, we have a method called shared inquiry, where we read the text and then we actually have a shared inquiry of the text together. not just lecture style. Actually, at DRBU, they don't really do lecture style at all. It's more of a shared inquiry, great books model. But what we found is that it's much more engaging in a spirit of we're all here learning from each other with the wisdom of the Buddha here in front of us, rather than, just one person just lecturing all the time. And so we felt that would be a really wonderful way to bring kind of more modern pedagogy into the monastic formation, into learning, and then having a kind of a really solid practice of Vinaya and training for monastics. And I'm going to say one last point, and this is Service Space, which is another community that's kind of part of Berkeley Buddhist Monastery in Redwood Vihara. And they're a group that just completely devotes themselves to service. They're not Buddhist, quote unquote, but they really embody this spirit of unconditional service. And you can look them up, servicespace.org. And we're actually, Jing Wei Shi, another monk here, and myself are going to be doing an online retreat called the 4 Fearless Hearts. So if you went to pod.servicespace.org/apply, you'll see there's a 4 Fearless Hearts pod. I think it's December 9th to 16th. And it's a retreat done for, you could say, quote unquote, everyone, not only Buddhists, but anyone interested in seeing how do we cultivate compassion, kindness, joy, and equanimity. And we kind of go through materials, but not just drawn from the Buddhist tradition, but from other religions, science, psychology, and so forth, stories, poetry, music, and kind of give people a kind of a much bigger understanding of really what these 4 hearts are. And so service space to us is this kind of ability to engage society, bringing it to the Dharma to the world in many different contexts. So Jing Wei Shi and myself recently went to India for one of their retreats called Gandhi 3.0. And we had a chance to be with many other religious or spiritual people, and kind of, you could say, leaders in different areas. But honestly, a lot of us just being with good-hearted people and living very simply, but you're really getting the chance to open our hearts and kind of connect in ways that sometimes we don't really get the opportunity in our society. So in some ways, we're also hoping that that the monastery on one side is a place to train monastics, but it's another place for people to feel safe to just be who they are and ask these deeper questions in life. Like I said, we just had a circle with the service-based community, 3 weekends ago, with one of their an MTV rapper turned service-based volunteer who just devotes his life to the kind of the children in the slums of India. He's named Nemo Patel. He came and visited for a day, and we had a circle and we went around and asked, what is success to you and how has it changed in your life? Which is an interesting question. And sometimes, especially here in the Bay Area where people are just go all the time, you never really think, so really, what is success? And how has that changed? And, what are the nuances of this? And so we just wanted the monastery to be a place where people can actually ask these deeper questions and learn important life skills. How do I communicate? How do I apologize? How do I restore a relationship that's broken? How do I work through conflict? How do I cultivate a deeper sense of well-being and peace and solitude? How can I reconnect with the natural world? And not that, I'm kind of isolated and alienated from the world, but I'm actually a part of this world. Right? I'm not a part from this world, but a part of this world, you could say. And so, so our hope for the monastery is that first, it's a place where men who really would like to train to become monks have a gateway to do that, but that from there will be a whole ecosystem of people who, everyone, families included, will be able to connect and find real meaning for their lives. And we had one day was I think it was an inner child immersion day, and families brought their little kids and had stories and games and so forth, and just a lot of fun. And being out in nature, that the redwoods have their own magic. It's kind of the nature's natural cathedrals, these tall trees, very quiet. and the light that's there just has this kind of interesting red hue from the redwood bark. So yeah.
Beautiful. I'm all in. Sounds wonderful that it's coming together, and yeah, so many shared like threads of things I've been encountering, and it feels just very timely to me. Like very, you know, I know a lot of young people. It's sort of become my job to meet young people who are very all stages of practice, but through that I've met a lot of them who are, you know, looking to practice as deeply as they can and looking for places to do that. And yeah, there's not so many options in the West right now. And
Yeah.
I think that that solid foundation in the Vinaya is super rare in the Mahayana.
Mhm.
And so that's, yeah, I'm excited hearing you talk about it. And I guess I wanna close with one final question, which is where is this process, this project at? And if somebody listened to this podcast and wanted to come visit you guys tomorrow, what would you tell them? And maybe tomorrow is not realistic, but that's
Yeah, yeah. Well, so Jingwei Shi and myself, we actually plan to move to Redwood Vihara full time starting in 2024 and have
mm,
maybe 2 to 3 months of more seclusion there until probably the end of March. And after that, kind of open up for people to start coming to visit and just have an open door policy. People can apply and stay for 1 or 2 weeks, and then and leave. And if they want to come back for a longer period, then they can apply to come back for longer. But they first have to have spent some time at the monastery, and then after doing that for some time, um, basically in our tradition, we ask people to spend at least 6 months in the monastery environment before they can apply to become a trainee or an anagarika. And so we plan to have something like that as well. So for people to people who are just, for instance, if somebody's a meditator and wants to come and practice with us, no problem. And there's no pressure to become a monastic. It's for us, it's, wherever your spiritual journey leads you, great. The monastery is a kind of a place to help people reflect, kind of create an open space where people kind of reflect what really matters to them, in a community that values that. Because oftentimes, I remember when I was, in high school and I was asking these questions, like, it's like, what happens to us after we die, and what are we doing with our lives? Is this really like only about making money? I remember my friends going like, "Are you depressed? Is everything okay?" And I said, "What? Don't you think these are important questions?" I said, yeah, yeah, And they kind of warmed up over some time, but I just remember this is not something oftentimes in polite society we ask. Most of the times, just do what everyone else is doing. And like here you get a chance to say, I have a open space, where people respect my, kind of a space for spiritual practice, but there's also a container for it so that there's virtue and kind of a kind of caring environment, and that people can then explore really what matters to them. And so I think that would be my first kind of doorway in, would say you can visit our website redwoodvihara.org, and very soon we'll start to post stuff, especially around kind of March time, on how people can visit and kind of this process. In the meanwhile, we do have many retreats that happen. So for instance, there's actually also, I would say probably starting next year, we have Guanyin recitation retreats at our main monastery, the City of 10,000 Buddhas. That was very much my gateway in. And it's a chance to really try out recitation practice with, the ceremonies are largely in Chinese, but actually we do a lot of explanation. We read the sutras, we have a chance to have discussion and a kind of introduction to practice. And so people get introduced to this recitation practice at the 10,000 Buddhas, and you can find the dates there. on the City of 10,000 Buddhas website. I think it's cttbusa.org, or we'll probably also post it on our Redwood Vihara website. If you're interested in doing more, we have retreats as well in Oregon, Buddha Root Farm. And we've been doing that every year for many years, except when COVID was going on. And that's a chance to practice out in the Oregon forest, kind of an old growth forest in Oregon, which is also very beautiful, and be in community for a week. Well, what else? If you really want to explore the kind of study side of things, there's Dharma Realm Buddhist University, and there's a BA program and an MA program that's both accredited. So people can get an accredited degree from a Buddhist university that doesn't require you to be Buddhist. It's essentially, if you're interested in, again, those deeper questions of life, but not just studying it, but also living them. So there's a contemplative dimension to the program as well that I think also serves as a really kind of goes hand in hand with the monastery. I don't know if you know Thomas Merton, but he's a very famous Catholic monk. I could say, I think maybe 19, from 19, I don't know, he passed away in 1980, I think, something around there. But he wrote an article that had a big influence on me called Learning to Live. And he actually says in it that the kind of the ideal university is just like a monastery. A little bit tongue in cheek, but he explains it, and it made a lot of sense to me. And so if people want to really devote their time to studying, there's that place. And I found that many of our community come through going through the university and then coming and spend time at the monastery. So what that allows for is you get a chance to really, and I think this is also important just being in the West, because we don't grow up with a kind of a Buddhist culture, you could say. If you look at, say, Thailand, China, Japan, Korea, Burma, so forth, Buddhism is very much integrated in the culture. And so there's a lot of assumptions that are just, there when people begin to practice. And so for us, kind of growing up in America, we have to actually really look deeply at our own assumptions, like not coming with a very kind of capitalistic, productive mindset to meditation, which oftentimes that's how I started. I didn't want to be successful as a Silicon Valley engineer or something, but I took the same mind and brought it into the Dharma and want to be a very successful meditator. And that whole approach to practice actually doesn't really reap really good results. So actually it's actually relearning or kind of untangling the things that we've learned, and then actually learning the Buddha's kind of skillful ways of seeing the world that will lead to real well-being and happiness for ourselves and those around us. And that takes time. It's not something we can just kind of switch, like a switch in our mind. It actually takes conversation, deep self-reflection, having good friends, so forth. So anyways, I think the simple story would be, actually, if you want to do something tomorrow, probably the closest thing to do is join the 4 Fearless Hearts Pod that's online. That's coming December 9th to 16th. And you can, I can share you with the link, and it's through Service Space. And then you can come check us out in March in Redwood Vihara and all the other events that we have. So yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for all of that. There's many, many ways that sounds like folks can get involved either sooner or later. And yeah, I'm excited about this project. I'm really happy to hear that it's moving forward and at the stage that it's at, and seems likely I'll be out there at some point.
Yeah,
so I'd love to
have you come and visit
and see how it's going. So yeah, I think I'll just say we can end it there and just thank you again, Chuan, for your time and your practice and sharing your experiences with us, and we'll possibly be in touch moving forward.
Well, great. Very happy talking with you. And for all those who are listening to this, wish you the best in your practice. and your journeys. And if you ever have a chance to come visit us at Redwood Vihara, we'd be very happy to have you come out and just be in the redwoods. That's actually most of the magic. Yeah.
Great.